And we're off. So, hey, welcome everybody to the latest episode of Higher Margins with me, your host, Brett Puffenbarger. And today I am joined by one of my absolute favorite people in the entire world, Peter Susu. He will get the inside joke on that one.
Still?
Peter Susu. So for everybody sitting here wondering what the heck I'm talking about, his name got double printed on a badge at a conference one time, and it became a running gag for the rest of my life, and he's never going to outrun it. So Peter and I have been friends for a long time. We used to work together. We have since kind of gone our own ways and done our own things. Most of you probably know him as the funny meme guy and hilarious observations dude on LinkedIn, but in his real life, he is the first vice president and director of specialty banking at FCSB and kind of one of the world's foremost experts on weed and banking, maybe. So Peter, tell everybody a little bit about yourself, what you do, who you are, that kind of stuff before we get into the nitty gritty of the questions that everybody's kind of gotten used to getting asked.
Wow. First of all, thank you. Wow. I'm looking around like, who's he bringing out here?
Yeah, who's this guy?
Who's he introducing? Brett, thank you for having me on the show. My name is Peter Su. I run a cannabis banking program. This is my fourth cannabis banking program. I joke that I'm like the cannabis banking midwife. I just birthed him out. So what do I do? Yeah, on a day-to-day basis, I bank a portfolio of cannabis businesses, and we're actually a lender in the industry as well.
Cool. So is this your, I'm going to go into that for a second. I promised you we wouldn't talk about work, but I got to know. Is that becoming more and more common, the lending in the cannabis space for financial institutions? I know a couple of years ago, back in our old life together, back at that old place, that was kind of unheard of. There was a very minimal amount. It seems like that's becoming more and more popular, and it's kind of standard fare. If you're going to bank cannabis businesses, you're also going to lend to them.
Well, common is probably not the right word, but yeah, I agree with you from an evolutionary perspective. And it's just basic business logic, right? Like, yeah, if we think about the trajectory, and look, it's not a very long time running, right? We're talking about 10 years, let's say, of legal cannabis. So you remember the early days when there was unbanked, and then eventually, they got accounts, but these accounts are minimally functional and but very expensive. And as time has progressed, the scales have just moved. That's all. So functionality, capability, capacity, et cetera, started to increase. Costs started to come down. Some of that is due to competition. That's a major reason. Some of it just passage of time. The first person that did it, the first bank that did it, they were pioneers. They jumped off a cliff, and they got to charge whatever they wanted. They got to enforce whatever the rules they wanted. So yes, to your point, what's happening today is that the reality is that fee is getting lower and lower and lower. And at some point, you say to yourself, well, it doesn't really make sense. I can't charge whatever that dollar amount is that you need to charge as an institution to cover your costs. So what's the next natural piece? Well, if I was willing to lend to this cannabis business, I'll still make enough money to cover the cost of the program. And then, of course, there's a question of competition, right? Like, I'm launching a new program, my fourth. What do I need to do to fight the incumbents, to grab market share, et cetera? I got to lend.
Yeah, that makes sense. Kind of standard. So from that perspective, are cannabis businesses different than regular businesses for like the underwriting and lending purposes, or is it kind of like falling into the just, okay, it's another SMB?
It's funny. For a few years, I've been kind of saying, I think what you're saying, which is when I go into a new program, and one of the reasons that I unfortunately have moved around a bit, because it's not by design, it's not by choice, rather. My problem has always been that I was always pushing for more. Meaning I wanted the bank to lend, I wanted the bank to do payments, et cetera, et cetera. At the heart of it is a very simple concept, which sounds really stupid when I say it, but I think as an industry participant, you understand what I mean. All I really want is a bank to say, we're willing to treat cannabis businesses like a normal business, which in my opinion it is. I'm in the state of New York. It is a legal industry in New York. I'm a state charter bank. They're a state licensed business. we're sane, right? That said, there are some very specific challenges to lending to cannabis. The first, the obvious, is 280E. Without getting too far into that, the reality is a lot of cannabis businesses are less profitable compared to a non-cannabis business. Then you have a question of collateral. So let's say the business makes enough money, conceptually, it could qualify for some sort of a credit facility. Your typical lender, a prudent lender, will say to themselves, well, what happens if the loan was to go bad? What's my exit? So that's another C word, right? That's the collateral. So your typical cannabis business, what's its most valuable asset? Arguably the license, which cannot be liened.
Maybe the license, maybe not. Depends on the state, right? Like, isn't that a net zero item at the end of the day? Like, eventually the license is no longer worth anything.
Well, so that's the second part of that, right? Which is, even if it could be liened, which, you know, again, depending on the market, in the state of New York, I cannot put a lien on a license. But you're exactly right. Even if I could, what is the trade value of that license? And well, first of all, there isn't one because I cannot foreclose on that license. Oh, I'm sorry, from a lender's perspective, it has virtually no value because I cannot do anything with it.
Right. You can't take it back. You can't use it. It's not, and it's inherently a depreciating asset, right? It's kind of like, this will sound silly, but like, isn't it not that different than lending on like a motor home or like a manufactured home? Like, it kind of, even if you could like take it, right? Like, assuming, you know, playing that kind of game, it's like lending for a manufactured home. The value is only going to go down. It's not going to appreciate like a regular home.
Well, let me give you a comparison. In the state of New Jersey, right, I can file a lien on a liquor license.
Interesting.
And there is a secondary market for it. I can dump, if I had to, if I can dump a liquor license for about 140 grand. So if this was, if New York's OCM had a similar rule, then one, I can execute a lien. Two, I know roughly what I can get for that. So, but what you're saying is 100% right. Like, what is the mechanism to file that lien? Is there one? Even if there was one, what's the value, right? So then the next obvious thing, all right, inventory. That should be obvious. Now that could go away with some sort of rescheduling, descheduling, etc. Except, of course, certain types of inventory, well, it's perishable, right? So again, to your point about whether it's the fact that it's the depreciating asset, whether it's the fact that it has a limited shelf life, whether it's the fact that, sure, the inventory has value, but if I had to dump it, if I had to execute a fire sale, is there actually a value? Like, yes, you're right. You have inventory worth $1 million in your shelf. But from a lender's perspective, meaning this loan has gone bad and I'm just going in there, you know, executing a Marshall clause, it actually has no value. But anyway, those are the things that are kind of specific to cannabis. Now, when I say specific to cannabis, it's actually not that unusual. There's lots of industries that deal with this type of issue. You know, restaurants, you know, I don't know, food, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So this is not specific to cannabis, but within the regulatory regime of what you and I know as state licensed, state siloed cannabis, yeah, these are some of the particulars that you would have to worry about. Receivables would be another big one, which is something that I'm doing. But the way a traditional banker like us do receivable financing is not true receivables financing. What we really do is we're still underwriting based on the cash flow of that business. And then we back into a math based on the ratio that we're willing to lend against that receivable portfolio.
So, so it sounds like cannabis is a regular SMB with a certain level of extra complication to it. With that, do you think the cannabis industry attracts a certain profile of people that are willing to even play in that world? And I don't mean from a lending perspective. I mean like our friends who are operators, your actual people you're lending to, that kind of stuff. you think there's like a set psychological profile? Do you think that's changed over the years? Has it gotten more sophisticated or different? Like, basically, does weed attract a certain kind of people?
I think so. I'm not sure why that is, or it's funny. I recently I was talking to the founders of Jeter.
Okay.
And you know how in cannabis there's this it always comes up all the time, right? Culture, cannabis culture. So I'm going to answer your question with a question, which is there such a thing as quote unquote cannabis culture? And it doesn't really come up in any other industry, right? Like we don't talk about alcohol culture.
It exists.
No, I think
I actually have an answer for this. Do you really want to crack? Okay, let's crack it open. So when I was putting together the MBA program at Rowan, right next door in New Jersey, when I was helping them put together the original courses for that, I had access to a lot of other college professors and like academics and real smart people, right? I'll never forget, I sat down with this woman named Olga, who is a sociology professor. And she's like, I don't smoke weed. I don't care about weed. I don't care about this. But I find it so interesting from a sociological and anthropological sense. And I'm like, okay, what the heck does that mean? And you're like, what the fuck are you talking about? And she broke it down like this. So all culture exists or has, standard culture, right? We talk about the Overton window and politics, and like this is what's normal for the time. It's what we talk about when we look at like you have to judge the actions back then in like the 1700s from what was culturally normal then versus now, and those kind of conversations, right? But all subcultures exist outside of that kind of window of what is normal, cultural things and like countrywide cultural things and like religious connotations and all of that withstanding, in context. But basically all subcultures exist outside of that box of what is normal within the confines of what we're talking about. So in the United States, we have a lot of subcultures and they exist in two varieties: opt-in subcultures and opt-out subcultures. So an opt-in subculture is I have to opt into being part of the subculture. Basically, it's I got to do all the things that my mom told me not to do to become part of it. So like punk rock, skateboarding, weed, in a lot of ways is an opt-in subculture. I have to say, don't tell me how to live my life. I'm going to choose to go through whatever the purity test or the litmus test or the like cool guy test to become part of it. You could also take that to like a really negative connotation, like gang culture is an opt-in subculture. There's all kinds of cultures that are opt-in or subcultures that are opt-in.
Yeah.
Whereas there are other subcultures, alcohol being one of them, that are opt-out subculture. So if you're in your 20s or 30s, you have to opt out of the subculture that is alcohol. And then you're the weirdo, right? You're opting out of it, but it is a real subculture, right? We behave differently as human beings, maybe not you and I, but like in general, right? Colloquial, we here, we behave differently within the confines of a bar or a nightclub than you do on the regular street, right? Like the behaviors that are exhibited are part of alcohol subculture. So there is a subculture to all of it. The problem becomes and this is me now, like not her really smart, like explaining all of that to me. So the problem I see with it is cannabis culture isn't homogenous. It's not one thing. So like we're East Coast cannabis guys, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but the Jeters guys are West Coast cannabis guys. Their cannabis culture is very different than ours. Their existence is different. They've had legal for a lot longer. They've gone through a lot more. They had a lot more intense like raids and situations in the early days because they were kind of in the pioneer world. They've got Humboldt and blah, blah, like the Emerald Triangle and all of that. Like, their cannabis culture is very different than like East Coast life, which went from like trap life to a bunch of like, Harvard and Brown and MIT kids in their boat shoes and board shorts. Like, you know what I mean? Like blazers and boat shoes showing up and saying like, forced vertical integration, regulatory capture. We know what we're doing. Like, don't worry, it's just a consumer packaged good. So like, my point being, I do believe cannabis has a subculture, but I think it's subcultures within the subculture. Like what we experience is different than what they do.
That makes a lot of sense to me. Now, the reason I answered your question with that question is leads me to the next thing, which is, does it matter relative to the business? So to your point, if your question is, are cannabis people different? What I would throw back at you is, what makes a successful cannabis business? Why do some brands stand out? Why do the Jeter guys sell out? And I'm sorry, sell out meaning their products are selling out. I don't mean they're sellouts.
Right. Oh man,
so the reason I posed that question to these gentlemen was and I think I hope I'm answering your question, which is, why does a product move and a different product does not? And my second question was, and I think we're new enough. New York, certainly, right? Very new market. So you will have folks that are walking in, and as you know, you're a marketing guy. In cannabis, we, for lack of a better phrase, we suffer from a lot of super buyers. Statistically speaking, you have people walking in that are, again, like the Pareto principle. These are the guys that are really coming in, buying thousands of dollars, hundreds of dollars of goods each time, right? So sure, those guys might walk in and say, hey, I know exactly what I want. I want this product. I want the Jeter. I want the cookies. Well, whatever brand is, whatever is going on, right? And it's even more specific than that. I want this particular strain, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But is there a product that's drawing someone into your dispensary? In other words, is there a noob who's walking in saying, hey, I'm looking for, Dubai chocolate as an example. When it went hot, there were people walking around saying, hey, do you carry Dubai chocolate, right? So what's the Dubai chocolate of cannabis? What's drawing someone into a dispensary who isn't familiar with cannabis? So basically my question is, if I own a store and I carry your product, will your product increase sales for me? Will you draw people into my store? And that's my long way of answering your question, which is, I think so. Because after 10 years, we're starting to see a commonality in the brands that are more successful versus the ones that are not. And I think this would interest you as a marketing expert, which is that I do think it's the folks that are pushing the culture. And when I say pushing the culture, it appears to be genuine, right? It appears that they're not just saying the word culture. They understand it, they live it, et cetera.
Yeah, right. They have that kind of sweet spot of like, we know what it used to be. We represent like the common man, the everyman kind of view of cannabis, but they also have some level of like business acumen. They know how to bookkeep. They know how to like, pass a compliance check. They know how to like get a decent COA.
Well, you know what I think, honestly, that's got to be baseline. The fact that it's not baseline, it's kind of scary, right? Like you're running it doesn't matter if you're selling, staplers or joints. If you can't do your basic, P&L, understand margins and stuff like that. Now, the reality is it's okay if you don't, meaning you're 100% owner of this dispensary and you don't know shit about financial statements. That's fine, but be honest with yourself and hire someone that does that, right? And this is a common topic in cannabis, the marriage, and then I've heard you say this a lot, the marriage of the roots and the suits, or whatever term you want to use. Which one are you, right? Like, are you the legacy guy, or are you the business guy, or are you both? That's okay to be both, right? Look, if I look around the state of New York, we have an interesting dynamic, right? Where we're a $2 billion annual sale run rate. But if you look at it, it's really top heavy. Like if you were to take out the top 20 players, that would drop to like, I don't know, 60% or something like that, right? And the commonality amongst the top players are, yeah, they're business savvy. Duh, right?
So let's take this down a slightly different path for a second. So you personally are successful in the cannabis industry, right? You're a known entity. You get invited to speak on things, like people know who you are. Like you are not some random dude on the street anymore struggling to make a name in the industry.
Thank you.
How much of How much of your personal success do you think came from understanding people and like the people aspect of things versus understanding like the nuts and bolts of the industry and like the actual like function of this chaotic world?
Well, I would hesitate to, say I'm successful or whatever, but I think
Okay.
look, I think, and actually, I've heard you say this, right? I don't know that I necessarily put all this effort into like trying to read people and stuff like that. I try to stay genuine, right? Like I know this sounds very cliche, but like I think I'm the same in every scenario. I talk the same when I'm on the panel. I talk the same when it's you and I in person. Um, I talk the same when it's a podcast, right? So rather than like change myself for every scenario, I'm just myself for every scenario, and I believe that it comes through. I think this goes back to what we were saying about the marriage of the roots and suits, right? Like I like to think that I'm one of those people that can be in different rooms and be myself in those different rooms, right? Like I'm not when I talk to one of these humble growers, I don't code switch, right? I'm not like, oh, I love weed, right? I ask them questions because honestly, some of these mad scientists say things I don't understand. I don't understand what they're saying, right? And I don't pretend to, right? And I respect that about you. I don't think you do that either. You're just yourself in that scenario. Whether I am giving out, whether I'm being asked a question, so I'm giving out knowledge, or whether I'm asking a question, I'm receiving knowledge. I like to think that I'm showing the right respect in each situation. So I think my answer to you is that, like, actually, I don't think that I read the room, if you will. I like to think that I'm just myself in whatever room I'm in.
You're just kind of being Peter Susu all the time, no matter where you're at.
Honestly, it helps that I'm like super charming, good looking, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, you got eyes, you know what's going on here.
Okay, fair enough. So this is a weird one. So you're kind of going down the line of like authenticity, and
Okay.
something that normally gets put down with authenticity is integrity. Do you think integrity is one of those things that you have to protect, or is it something you re-choose every day? Meaning, like, do you think you have integrity and you have to like maintain it, or do you think it's something you wake up every day and you're like, all right, I got to redo it today. I got to be like a decent human being. You could also apply that to authenticity.
Well, integrity is an interesting word. I think it is commonly misused. Because what does integrity, and I'm not suggesting you're misusing it. I'm just saying there's a common there is a common refrain that integrity, the word integrity, suggests something. People say, oh, you got to show integrity. But what does integrity actually mean? Integrity means wholeness, right? So kind of going back to what I just said about being the same person in every room. Because the reality is, if you're a thief, integrity to you means being a thief in every room that you're in, right? So, do I think that integrity is something that you have to do every day? Yeah, because you can walk into that room and I could choose to be like a poser, right? I can code switch, etc. But you and I have seen each other dozens of times. You see me on panel. This is the same.
Love to see you show up in a hoodie and shit, like with a skateboard, like how do you do fellow kids meme?
Hey, kids. Now, that doesn't mean that obviously you do have to read the room to some extent, right? Like I can't go up on stage and start cursing, perhaps, although some people do. But the point is that, like, look, in the banking boardroom, for example, and hey, this is one of your lines, right? From the bong to the boardroom. Can you be the same person literally, from the bong to the boardroom? No. But can you be integral? Can you have integrity from across that entire spectrum? Yes. And yes, I agree with you. I think that's what you're saying, is that you choose to be that.
Yeah, I personally do. I think I choose to continue to be me because I mean, like, I think there's a lot of ways that people can be tempted to just be something they're not, to
Yeah.
get ahead. To your point, you were talking earlier about like cannabis businesses are less profitable. That applies to the people who play in the industry too, right? Like we do more with less in a harder industry, probably making less than our peers in other industries. Like you could choose to, whatever you want to call it, skip the line, do things that lack in integrity, or you can choose to get up every day and keep doing the best you can in whatever modality that means. So speaking of that, do you consider yourself ambitious? Like, do you like what's your relationship to ambition these days?
Brett, have you ever seen the movie Malice?
No, no. Oh no.
So there's a scene in the movie Malice when Alec Baldwin is a doctor and he's being deposed, and the question posed to him was, Dr. Baldwin, do you have a God complex? And Alec Baldwin's character starts basically reciting his achievements. He's like, Brett, I was the youngest. I have a medical degree from Harvard. I'm the youngest board certified obstetrician, double board certified in, blah, blah, blah. When you go to church on Sundays and you pray that your wife makes it through, that your son makes it through. Who do you think you're praying to? So my answer to you is, Brett, I have 25 licenses and certifications across all.
Do you really, like 25? Like that's the actual number? I've always wondered, like, because anybody, for those of you listening that don't have any clue who this guy is, his name is literally like to the edge of the row, down to the next row, because he's got so many letters behind his name.
Oh, I ran out of room. I have some licenses, certifications that are not there.
Did you like you like put them in alphabetical order now, or like what's the deal?
Oh, no, not necessarily. I want to say they're just in the order of when I got them. Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing that I moved around was based on what I believe to be their level of prestige. Like a CTP, a certified treasury professional, I guess would be my most prestigious one.
Interesting. All right, back to your answer. So like you have 25 certificates. Carry on.
No, that was the answer.
Oh. Are you going to get more? Like, what's the?
Yeah. I mean, look, I think you have to keep learning. You can't stay still. Even from my perspective, I dare say that I'm one of the few names that people reach for when they want to talk about cannabis banking, cannabis financing. But I can't stand still, right? I can't assume that that's it. I'm good, So to me, yes, sort of staying. They have this saying, right? Put in 10,000 hours, you can call yourself an expert. And I don't call myself an expert, but that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to put in that 10,000 hours. I want to be at the forefront of it. So yes.
Do you think that's going to change? So like, I don't want to go down too much of the political path, but
why? What do you mean?
Well, I think it would be remiss if we don't touch on this. So for those of you who are wondering when this gets recorded versus when it gets released, 2 days ago, the president posted about the endocannabinoid system, right? Like basically the night before last.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to go down that position of like, do we believe him? What do we think happens? Like any of that. But like, I think it's put federal legalization at the front of people's minds.
Sure.
Crystal ball time. What happens with Schedule 3 in your mind? What happens if we get full decriminalization? Like, how does that affect your world as a weed banker, for lack of a better term?
Well, a reschedule is actually fascinating. Specifically, the Schedule 3 is kind of fascinating from a cannabis banking perspective. So Schedule 1, right? So right now, cannabis is a Schedule 1, which means there's no way to be compliant with Schedule 1, obviously, right? Like anything that's in Schedule 1 is fully legal, as they say, right? Illegal, excuse me. But Schedule 3, there is a regulatory regime to fit in Schedule 3. So let's assume reschedule happens today, let's say, right? Is anybody in cannabis industry Schedule 3 compliant? No,
Probably not.
no, no, because you need two major components. You need a doctor prescribed FDA product, FDA approved product, neither of which exists right now. And as you know,
You can't. Yeah.
yeah, as you know, a lot of those products are not FDA approvable.
Right. Yeah.
Just cannot be. It literally. Doctors, as you know, a lot of doctors won't prescribe cannabis.
Well, they can't technically, right? Like, I had a conversation with a lawyer one time about this. When we talk about this, a lot of people say, well, I have, it's medical cannabis. It's not really medical, it's medicinal at best because it's not prescribed, and it can't be because a prescription is one of those very controlled terms, right? If a doctor were to prescribe cannabis outside of like the 5 patients that get it from that medical grow in Louisiana, right? Like those 5 people don't exist, right? Like those aren't real people in this conversation. For everybody else, right? Like for the entire rest of the world, if a doctor were to write a prescription today for cannabis, they would lose their license immediately because they're prescribing a special federally regulated special term, a Schedule 1 substance. So like really it's impossible for anybody to be capable of fitting the Schedule 3 requirements today. And that's notwithstanding product quality, right? Like assume everybody is the most up and up EU GMP manufacturing with every possible lab thing and they couldn't possibly be, right? Like,
well, in a more specific sense, what I mean is, and again, I believe you and I have talked about this, which is doctors are not trained on cannabis today. So forget about like illegality or legality for a second. If you were to just do a random sampling of 20 doctors, let's say, and you ask them what's your thoughts on cannabis, what's your experience, what's your training on cannabis, I would bet most of them, and I've done this. A lot of my neighbors are doctors, and when the subject of cannabis comes up, first of all, a lot of them have a very negative stigma to it. They don't believe in it. Second, even if that were to change, right? Let's say legality changes tomorrow, it's going to take a generation to get these doctors caught up on, when to prescribe cannabis, et cetera, et cetera. So number one, prescription.
Hold on. Well, yeah, I have to take us off topic for a minute. So you live in New York, right? You live on Staten Island or one of those, right? Long Island, whatever. So you live Long Island, traditionally like left-leaning area, right? Like again, I'm not trying to get super down into the politics of it, but a decently traditional left-leaning area, at least more socially liberal area. So I live in rural Virginia, which is like redder than red, right? Like I live in like Trumplandia for all intents and purposes. I also happen to, so I live in a neighborhood of like 20 couple houses. I have 5 doctors that live in my neighborhood, right? I just had an HOA meeting a week ago or something, and I was talking to them about it because they're curious, like, what the fuck do you guys do? How do you afford to live here? Like, who are you, right? Like, who are you weird tattooed young people? Because like, and my wife Jody and all of that, Peter. So none of this is like, this, but kind of like for those listening, we are the youngest people in our neighborhood by 35 years. Like, not even kidding, 35 years, right? Everybody else in the neighborhood's in their 70s, in their 80s. They're all retired doctors. Every single one of the doctors in my neighborhood find it so fascinating. They're like, oh, I love it. I take CBD for this. Or like, don't tell anybody, but I have my little pot plant on the back porch. And like, my experience with that has been vastly different than what you're describing. And I guess in my mind, it just kind of like triggered one of those like kind of flashers. I'm like, wait a minute. Why are these like fancy city folk doctors not more friendly to weed than my like redneckville USA doctors?
Well, and look, I'm speculating here, right? But I do think that a lot of it has to do with training. I think that's probably no different than any generational stigma. Like, I mean, look, for most of my life, cannabis was illegal. But I would bet that there is a 20-year-old kid, I'm going to say kid, in California today, for whom cannabis was legal, his or her entire life, and they have zero stigma. It doesn't register for them at all. As far as they know, it's just some product, in fact, they probably, you and I talk about this a lot. When you legalize weed, it's not cool anymore. Oh, my grandma takes that stuff,
Right.
So the doctors that are, roughly my age, let's say, when they were growing up, well, cannabis was illegal. It was not taught in medical school. ECS is not taught in medical school, right? So all of this is to hopefully address your question, which is, look, reschedule happens tomorrow. It's going to be years and years before you can actually make this work, right? Like in a fully compliant way is what I mean, right? So why do I think that's fascinating? Well, from a banking perspective, right now you've got a company that is banking, and the challenge is that they're violating Schedule 1 of the CSA. A year from now, they're violating Schedule 3 of the CSA. They're violating the same exact law.
So it doesn't really change anything.
Well, I mean, look, it changes the stigma of it.
Right.
But so this actually does happen pretty often. I aside from the programs that I have personally led or been a team member of, as you know, we were consultants, right, to dozens of companies. And multiple times I've seen board members, like individual board members, raise their hand and say, I'm personally against cannabis. And in some cases that actually that eliminates the initiative to do cannabis banking. Does some of that go away with reschedule? Probably. So yeah, like I would expect competition to increase. I would expect costs to come down. I expect more lending, but not because the problem, if you will, has been miraculously solved, but for a very simple business principle, which is competition. More people will come in, more banks will come in, and just like I did, and I expect any new program will have to do, you study the market and you say, what do I need to do to compete in this market? I need to do more.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? So they'll have to get more creative with the lending they offer, more creative with the services they offer, online banking portals. Like, they're basically just going to have to increase their customer service, which is traditionally not something that banks do a lot of, right? Because they're used to being, what was the phrase I've heard people talk about? Like, banks don't really care about competition because you have more than one bank card in your pocket right now. Everybody does, right? Like, they're going to have to get more creative if they want to maintain a cannabis portfolio.
Well, it depends. So this stuff has been studied, to the ad nauseum, right? So we know displacing an account. There's but so many triggers, meaning a person is leaving a bank and going to a new bank, or credit union for that matter, right? Why does a person do that? Why does a business do that? So we call it the C's: capability, capacity, cost, convenience, credit. So that's it.
Right.
And it makes a lot of sense. Now, sure, there's emotional triggers. Sometimes, something happened, right? You hang up, you're like, oh, I hate this bank. I'm going to close my account. Something happens.
That was me with Bank of America.
Yeah.
Like they pissed me off one time too many, and I was like, I'm out. I don't want to do this anymore.
Now, in cannabis, I do think that there's more of those opportunities. There's either net new, meaning it's a new business. So again, let's say New York, we've got a lot of new licensees looking for accounts. So that's probably more marketing, meaning I have to insert my name into their thought process somehow. If their first call is to an attorney, I want that second call to be to me.
Right. Yeah. You want the attorneys to know who you are. You want the other service providers that are kind of early stage to know who you are. So that they're like, yeah, those guys. Yeah.
And same thing with the emotional trigger, right? Hey, that person that slams their phone on the banker, that next call, I want that to be me. And that's marketing. That's reputation. That's, LinkedIn for you and I.
Right. Yeah.
But bottom line, that there's only but so many triggers that causes a person or a bank to move their account. And yes, to your point, it's also common to have multiple accounts. In cannabis, not as common, mostly because of fees and regulatory requirements and stuff like that. But I think we'll get there. Yeah.
All right. So last two questions. I ask everybody the same last two questions. if tomorrow was your last day in cannabis, what do you hope people would say you stood for? Not your company, not anything else, like not what you're known for. What do they hope they say you stood for?
I hope, genuinely, when I first got into cannabis, it was also roughly when I started on LinkedIn, meaning actively posting. Back then, there were very few people. Cannabis in general, there was not as many people. I think you were the only person that I came across that was a prolific poster, right? I hope that what people remember is that I was one of the advocates, push the envelope, if you will. And hey, look, I put my money where my mouth is, right? I moved banks so that I could keep pushing that issue forward. Literally left jobs so that I could create a better program and a better program and a better program. So yeah, I hope what people see, and I referenced to LinkedIn because, like I said, when I first started, to my knowledge, there was no one talking about cannabis banking, for sure. And I was one of the, I think I was one of the first, so I hope that one of my legacy is that I was that guy that pushed that issue forward.
Love that. All right, so last one. And this one trips people up a little bit. I've gotten some interesting answers on this one. If you were starting...
Before you ask you a question.
Oh, shit. All right.
Your audience a funny story.
Yeah.
Do you remember getting me kicked off a podcast?
I do. Yeah. Well, I remember us
the only podcast
and never getting it published.
The only podcast I've ever done that didn't get published was with you.
Yeah, it's true. I remember some other crazy shit. Do you remember when you almost got us kicked out of MJ BizCon because you picked up the no smoking sign and ran it Braveheart style through the crowd?
Yes, I do remember, and we did not almost get kicked out. You are exaggerating.
No, we almost got kicked out. The security came, and if it wasn't for that nice guy who was the janitor arguing with the security guy, we would have all been done.
So for your audience, I want to let you know that the only podcast I've ever done, meaning recorded, etc., and it never got pushed out, and I blame Brett because Brett was sitting next to me, and you were making the worst jokes. Worst jokes, not like they weren't funny, like they were not politically correct. And I blame you that never got published. And
it is my fault, and they won't let me on that podcast ever.
Oh, I wonder why.
Yeah, I don't know. I think they need to grow up a little bit and have a little bit more fun. Obviously, we were having a good time. They should have known, because just so everybody knows, Peter and I were minding our business, wandering through the halls of, I don't remember what conference it was, MJ Unpacked maybe. Yeah. So we were just wandering, just the two of us, we weren't making a scene, nothing. We were just walking, and they're like, "Hey, you guys, you're LinkedIn famous. Come do this podcast." And we were just having a good time, and we were cracking jokes and having a good time. And just so everybody both knows, Peter and I are both veterans, so we have a very specific kind of humor that we engage in just with each other. Here's another fun one for everybody. Peter has attempted to have a meme war with me twice in the history of LinkedIn, and both times resulted in him no longer being at the job he was at.
Total coincidence.
Totally, yeah. It had nothing to do with the fact that I totally kicked your ass at a meme war. All right, so last question. If you were starting from scratch today, no name, no contacts, no money, nothing, right? Nothing. Would you still choose cannabis and cannabis banking, obviously, because that's your sub niche? And if so, what's the first move you would make?
Wow, that's a fascinating question. I'm going to say I think so. I think so because I think that, the path that I thought I saw when I started out, I think became true. There was this greenfields, we call it, right? Banking. For me, the way it kind of happened was back in the day, I knew that folks that I knew, bankers that I knew that did very well, they tended to specialize in something. They had a particular niche where they were known somewhere. And so, I wanted that for myself. cannabis happened to become that niche. But for, it honestly could have gone any way, right? Crypto was roughly the same time era. But knowing what I know, and I realize the context is you're saying you're starting over or whatever, but, knowing what I know today, I enjoy it. I enjoy the people. I enjoy the industry. Yes, there are challenges, but that's part of the journey. Yeah, my answer would be yes. Or rather, my answer would be, I think so.
How would you do it? What's your first thing you would do?
This sounds crazy, and it comes up all the time. You've probably even heard this before suggested, which is, why doesn't someone start a bank? Now, it would be imprudent to believe that a bank could specialize in cannabis, meaning only do cannabis. But I think that there would be tremendous opportunity in a bank that does high risk.
Okay. So like cannabis, porn, adult industries, guns, shit like that. Like
correct. Now, again, you can't build an entire portfolio that way, right? Because you would fail what we call safety and soundness. But these days it's really easy, and a lot of banks operate this way. You advertise, let's say you advertise like the best CD rates or whatever, right? At a fundamental level, how do banks work? We have something called a NIM, a net interest margin. So it's the difference between what you're paying out and what you charge for loans, as an example. So it would actually be, if you think about how this business model could work, you would just have a bunch of very high, well, relatively speaking, high rate loans. And look, we're still talking about bank rates. I'm talking about like a 10% line of credit to business, let's say, which is where I'm priced at for cannabis. And if I'm paying out, let's say 3% on like CDs, right? My NIM is 7%. That is ridiculous in the industry. The industry average is banking industry average is around 3% NIM.
All right, so that was really fancy language for basically you can make a very profitable business out of doing high risk businesses, but you would have to make sure that you had enough non-high risk businesses that you didn't get flagged for being crazy reckless.
Right, because then your entire portfolio is high risk.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. Well, that's it. I got nothing else.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, man. Is there anything else you want to say for closing? You want to throw me under the bus some more? You want to talk a little more shit? Like, what do you want?
No, in closing, Brett, thank you very much. I want to give you a shout out. And as I said, you were, one of the first operators I saw online. I respect the game. I respect what you're doing out there. And I think you're one of the few that has always consistently maintained a high level of engagement without resorting to tricks.
Occasionally, I pull tricks sometimes, but I appreciate that. I never set out. I said this on another episode with Joe Hodis a couple of weeks ago. I never set out to become like an influencer or anything like that, right? Like, I was arguing with people about dumb shit on Facebook, and my wife Jody was like, "You should go argue with people that matter, not just like randos on Facebook. So go get a LinkedIn." So then I did, and then when I went back to grad school and did the master's in PR, I somehow ended up convincing them to let me do growing a social media audience as my master's thesis. So a lot of what people like got to know me for back then was me running through like a month or 6-week test personas that are all me, right? They were really me. Like anybody who's met me knows I'm pretty much exactly what you get online and all the time.
Integrity.
But dialed up a little bit, right? Like I wanted to talk more about this or that. And like, so there was some level of science to like changing that persona there. I never thought it would work, right? Like I thought this was going to be one of those like failed master's theses where I'm like, yeah, I got 3,000 followers, like go me. And then somehow I like exploded very quickly and got to like 12,000 or 14,000 or something. And I was like, oh, fuck. Now sitting at, I don't know, whatever, pushing 35,000, which I guess is like a lot in LinkedIn land. It's not a lot on other social media platforms. It was never something I set out to do. So now it's actually become like almost a burden to the point where I'm like, well, the masses demand it. I have to say some shit, like.
I must.
but it does, it is to some degree the canvas for my overactive mind. I
Okay.
treat it the same way in certain ways where it's just like, what the hell am I thinking of today? Like, what the fuck's going on in my brain? Like, good, bad, otherwise, like, is it relevant? Who cares? Like, I'm just gonna throw it out there and see. Like, I'm past the point of intentionally like content curating, right? Like, I still intentionally format the post to perform well and shit like that, because what's the point of like screaming into the void if people aren't going to read it? But like, I'm not like sitting there thinking anymore. Like, I used to have a list of like the 5 topic categories that I wanted to cover every week, like a personal story, an anecdote, a business. Like, I don't do that anymore. Now it's just like, what am I thinking of today? Like, all right, let's put
When I said tricks, I meant like the bots.
Oh yeah, I don't do any of that.
Yeah,
We know some people that do that.
of course.
All right, man. Thank you so much for being on. I'll let you know ahead of time before this comes out, and catch you on the other side, man.
Yeah, man. Thank you very much.